Hey everyone, welcome back to Try Not to Sleep. I'm your host, Ethan Brooks, and as always, we're here with another calm, slightly boring story from history to help you unwind. Tonight, we will be talking about the story of what was Earth like during the Ice Age. Documentary for sleep. Alright, get comfortable. And let's see how far you make it before you fall asleep. Returning to ancient times. The Ice Age began over 2.5 million years ago. Scientists call this period the Pleistocene. During this time, the planet's climate cooled, and glaciers advanced across much of North America, Europe, and Asia. Ice sheets sometimes reached 2 miles thick. These glaciers covered entire regions, pressing down on the land and carving out valleys and lakes. The weight of the ice flattened hills and left behind boulders and ridges when it melted. Earth's climate did not remain steady. The ice sheets advanced and retreated many times. Each cycle lasted tens of thousands of years. These changes were driven by slow shifts in Earth's orbit, tilt and wobble. When summers in the northern hemisphere became cooler, snow and ice built up year after year. When the climate warmed, the glaciers melted and retreated. Vast grasslands formed between the ice sheets and southern forests. Scientists call this area the Mammoth Steppe. It stretched from Western Europe across Siberia and into North America. This grassland was home to large herds of animals. Woolly mammoths, bison, and horses grazed on tough grasses. Giant ground sloths and woolly rhinoceroses also lived here. Predators such as saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and cave lions hunted these herds. Human ancestors appeared in Africa before the Ice Age began. Over thousands of years, they spread into Europe and Asia. By the height of the Ice Age, humans had reached every continent except Antarctica. They adapted to the cold using fire, clothing, and shelters made from bones, skins, and stones. People hunted large animals and gathered plants. They made tools from stone, bone, and antler. Some tools were used for cutting meat, scraping hides, or shaping wood. Others became spear points or needles. People also left marks on the world. They carved images into bones and painted animals on cave walls. These artworks show mammoths, bison, and other creatures. The exact reasons for these marks are not known, but they remain as evidence of life during ancient times. A world both familiar and alien. During the Ice Age, the world's landscapes looked both familiar and strange. Today's continents were in place, but coastlines stretched much farther out. Sea levels dropped as water became locked in ice sheets. Vast plains appeared where there are now shallow seas. Land bridges formed, connecting Asia to North America and Britain to mainland Europe. Herds of animals and groups of humans could cross continents on foot. The climate was colder and drier than today. Winters were long and harsh. Summers were short and cool. Winds swept across the Mammoth Steppe, carrying dust and snow. Forests grew only in sheltered southern regions. Most of the land between the ice sheets and the forests was open grassland. These plains supported giant mammals that no longer exist. Woolly mammoths moved in lines, digging through snow for grass. Woolly rhinoceroses grazed beside them. Herds of bison and wild horses roamed in great numbers. Predators adapted to the cold as well. Saber-toothed cats had long curved teeth and powerful bodies. Dire wolves hunted in packs, using strength and teamwork. Cave lions were larger than any living cat today. Their limbs were long and lean, built for running after prey across the open steppe. All of these animals had thick fur and broad paws to help them survive the cold and move through snow. Humans were part of this world, but not its rulers. They built shelters from bones and hides. They wore layered clothing made from animal skins and furs. Fire was essential for warmth, cooking, and safety. People hunted in groups using spears and coordinated tactics. Sometimes they scavenged meat left by larger predators. Survival depended on knowledge, cooperation, and adaptability. The world's size and emptiness shaped daily life. Distances were vast, and travel was slow. People followed herds and the changing season. They learned to read animal tracks and weather signs. Every journey and every hunt required careful planning. The Ice Age world was harsh, but it provided everything needed for those who understood its challenges. The Ice Age unveiled. The Ice Age lasted for millions of years, shaping the surface of the Earth. Glaciers advanced and retreated dozens of times. Each advance locked up more water in ice, causing sea levels to fall. Coastal plains expanded and land bridges appeared. When the ice melted, sea levels rose again, flooding those plains and cutting off land connections. The outline of continents changed repeatedly. The Laurentide ice sheet covered most of Canada and the northern United States. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet spread across the north. Glaciers pressed down on the land, carving deep valleys and leaving behind lakes and rocky debris. When the ice retreated, the land began to rise slowly, a process called isostatic rebound. This rebound continues today, with some regions still rising millimeter by millimeter each year. Earth's orbit and tilt changed gradually over thousands of years. These changes controlled the amount of sunlight reaching different parts of the planet. Cooler summers allowed snow and ice to build up, while warmer periods caused melting. These cycles are known as glacial and interglacial periods. The last glacial maximum occurred at about 20,000 years ago. During the coldest times, the mammoth steppe stretched from Western Europe across Asia to North America. This grassland was the largest ecosystem on Earth. It supported millions of animals, including mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer. Predators such as cave lions, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats hunted these herds. The size and strength of these animals were adaptations to the cold and the need to travel long distances for food. Humans adapted to these conditions by developing new tools and techniques. They made spear points from stone and bone and used fire for warmth and protection. Camps were set up near rivers and migration routes. People used the changing landscape to their advantage, hunting animals on newly exposed plains and gathering plants in sheltered valleys. The Ice Age world demanded resilience and ingenuity from every living thing. Vast ice sheets cover the planet. At the height of the Ice Age, enormous ice sheets blanketed large parts of the world. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet stretched from the Arctic to present-day New York and Chicago. It was up to 2 miles thick in places. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet covered Scandinavia, northern Germany, and the British Isles. Smaller ice caps and mountain glaciers formed in the Alps, the Andes, and the Himalayas. These ice sheets formed gradually as snow accumulated year after year. Summers were too cool to melt all the winter snow, so it compacted into ice. Over thousands of years, The ice thickened and spread outward under its own weight. The land beneath the ice was pressed down by the immense weight, causing the crust to sink. The presence of so much ice changed the planet's climate. The bright white surface of the ice reflected sunlight, keeping temperatures low. Winds carried cold, dry air across the continents. Precipitation patterns shifted, and much of the world became drier. Deserts expanded in some regions, while other areas received more snowfall. As the ice sheets grew, they locked up vast amounts of water. Sea levels dropped by more than 100 meters at times. And this exposed new land along the coasts and created land bridges between continents. The Bering Land Bridge connected Asia and North America, allowing animals and humans to migrate between them. Other land bridges linked Britain to Europe and Australia to Southeast Asia. Glaciers moved slowly, flowing outward and reshaping the landscape. They carved deep valleys, scoured bedrock, and left behind moraines and drumlins. When the ice melted, meltwater formed rivers and lakes. Some valleys filled with water to become today's Great Lakes in North America. The marks of these glaciers can still be seen in rocky outcrops, U-shaped valleys, and scattered boulders. The vast ice sheets were not static. They advanced and retreated in response to changes in Earth's orbit and climate. Each movement left new features on the land, creating the foundation for the landscapes seen today. Cold advances gradually. The advance of the Ice Age was not sudden. Temperatures dropped over centuries, allowing snow to persist year after year. Each winter, new layers of snow pressed down on the last, slowly turning into dense ice. Glaciers began to creep outward from polar regions and high mountains, moving inches each year. Over thousands of years, these glaciers expanded to cover millions of square miles. The process was driven by changes in Earth's orbit, tilt, and wobble. When the planet's tilt decreased, northern summers became cooler, and less ice melted. As the orbit stretched, sunlight was distributed differently across the globe. These shifts happened so slowly that no living creature could notice the change from one year to the next. But over generations, the impact became clear. Grasslands and forests gave way to tundra. Rivers shifted as glaciers blocked and redirected their flow. Valleys filled with ice, and new lakes formed in depressions carved by moving glaciers. Animals responded to the gradual cold by adapting in size and behavior. Mammoths grew thick, shaggy coats, and layers of insulating fat. Bison and horses developed dense fur and migrated in large herds to find food. Predators changed as well. Dire wolves and saber-toothed cats became more robust, with powerful muscles for hunting in deep snow. Their paws widened to prevent sinking into drifts. Humans also adapted to the changing world. They learned to build shelters from bones, hides, and stone. They gathered around fires for warmth, using animal fat and wood as fuel. Clothing became thicker and more layered, made from the pelts of animals they hunted. Stone tools grew more specialized, with new shapes for scraping hides, cutting meat, and shaping wood. The cold did not arrive everywhere at once. Some regions remained ice-free for centuries longer than others. In these places, forests and grasslands survived, providing refuge for both animals and people. But the overall trend was clear. The world was growing colder, and the ice was advancing, reshaping the land and the lives of everything that depended on it. Earth's landscape begins to change. As the ice advanced, Earth's surface transformed. Glaciers carved deep valleys and gouged out basins. They pushed rocks and soil ahead of them, creating long ridges called moraine. When the ice melted, these moraines remained as evidence of the glacier's path. The weight of the ice pressed the land downward. In some regions, the crust sank by hundreds of meters. Rivers changed course as glaciers blocked their flow. Water pooled behind walls of ice, forming vast glacial lakes. When these ice dams broke, floods swept across the land. These floods carved channels and scoured the earth, moving boulders and soil for miles. Some of the world's largest lakes, such as the Great Lakes in North America, formed in depressions left by retreating glaciers. Sea levels dropped as more water became locked in the ice sheets. New coastal plains appeared, and land bridges connected continents. The Bering Land Bridge linked Asia and North America, while other bridges joined Britain to Europe and Australia to Southeast Asia. Animals and humans crossed these routes, spreading to new lands. Grasslands expanded across the exposed plains. The mammoth steppe stretched from Western Europe to North America, supporting herds of mammoths, bison, and horses. Predators such as saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and cave lions followed the herds. Forests retreated to warmer, sheltered areas. Tundra spread along the glacier's edge, with hardy plants and animals adapted to cold and wind. The pressure of the ice changed the earth beneath it. When glaciers retreated, the land began to rise, a process called isostatic rebound. This uplift continues today in places once covered by thick ice. Every valley, river, and plain was touched by the movement of glaciers. The landscape was not simply recovering from the ice. It was remade by it. The marks of the Ice Age remain in the shape of continents, the course of rivers, and the location of lakes. These changes set the stage for the next chapters in Earth's history. Endless grasslands stretch across continents. During the Ice Age, a vast ecosystem known as the mammoth steppe dominated the northern hemisphere. This grassland stretched from Western Europe, across Siberia, and into Alaska and the Yukon. It was the largest biome of its time, covering more land than any grassland today. The mammoth steppe was not a frozen tundra, nor a dense forest. It was a wind-swept plain, cold but dry, with hardy grasses and small flowering plants. The climate of the mammoth steppe was shaped by the presence of nearby glaciers. Cold winds swept down from the ice sheets, keeping temperatures low and moisture scarce. Trees were rare, limited to sheltered valleys. Most of the landscape was open, allowing herds of animals to move freely across great distances. Woolly mammoths traveled in large groups, digging through snow to reach the grass beneath. Bison, wild horses, reindeer, and saga antelope grazed on the tough steppe vegetation. These animals migrated with the seasons, following the growth of new grasses. Their size and thick coats helped them survive the cold. Predators such as cave lions, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats hunted these herds. They relied on strength, teamwork, and speed to bring down prey in open country. Humans also made use of the mammoth steppe. Small bands moved along rivers and animal trails, hunting and gathering. They followed the herds, using stone-tipped spears and coordinated drives to hunt large animals. The wide grasslands provided food, materials for tools, and open space for travel. Camps were often set up near water sources or migration routes. The mammoth steppe connected continents and supported life on a grand scale. It allowed animals and people to move between Europe, Asia, and North America. As the Ice Age continued, this vast grassland remained the heart of the northern world, shaping the lives of all who depended on its resources. Woolly mammoths march in herds. Woolly mammoths were among the most iconic animals of the Ice Age. They stood up to 11 feet tall at the shoulder and could weigh over 6 tons. Their long, curved tusks sometimes reached 15 feet in length. Thick, shaggy hair and a layer of fat up to 4 inches deep protected them from the cold. Their small ears and short tails helped reduce heat loss. Mammoths lived in large herds, sometimes numbering in the hundreds. These herds moved constantly across the mammoth steppe, searching for food. They followed ancient migration routes, often walking in single file to conserve energy and break trails through deep snow. The lead animals dug through snow with their tusks and trunks, uncovering buried grasses and sedges. Younger mammoths and calves followed behind, eating what the adults exposed. Herds often included females and their young, led by an experienced matriarch. Adult males usually traveled alone or formed small bachelor groups. Calves were born in the spring, after a gestation period of nearly 2 years. Mothers cared for their young for several years, teaching them how to find food and avoid danger. Mammoths needed to eat hundreds of pounds of vegetation each day. They grazed on tough grasses, herbs, and shrubs. Their broad, flat teeth were adapted for grinding fibrous plants. During harsh winters, they relied on their memory to find areas where the wind had swept away snow or where rivers kept the ground bare. Woolly mammoths were not rare or solitary. Their herds shaped the landscape, trampling paths, spreading seeds, and fertilizing the soil. Other animals followed in their tracks, taking advantage of the cleared ground. Predators such as cave lions and dire wolves watched for weak or young mammoths at the edge of the herd. For thousands of years, the presence of mammoth herds defined life on the steppe. Their movements marked the rhythm of the seasons and the flow of life across the Ice Age plains. Predators built for the cold. The Ice Age steppe was home to formidable predators, each adapted to the harsh climate and the challenge of hunting giant prey. Dire wolves ranged across North America, larger and more muscular than modern wolves. Their powerful jaws and strong teeth allowed them to crush bone and tear through thick hides. Dire wolves hunted in packs, working together to bring down bison, horses, and sometimes young mammoths. Saber-toothed cats, known as Smilodon in the Americas, were among the most famous Ice Age hunters. They had long, curved canine teeth that could reach over 7 inches. Their bodies were stocky and muscular, built for strength rather than speed. Saber-toothed cats often ambushed prey, using their weight and powerful forelimbs to wrestle animals to the ground before delivering a fatal bite. Cave lions, the largest cats of the era, roamed the grasslands of Eurasia and North America. These lions were larger and leaner than modern African lions. Their long legs and deep chests allowed them to pursue prey across open plains. Cave lions hunted in groups and targeted horses, reindeer, and sometimes young mammoths. Their remains have been found deep in caves, suggesting they sometimes used these shelters for raising cubs or escaping severe weather. These predators had thick fur coats to shield them from the cold. Their broad paws distributed their weight, helping them move over snow without sinking. This adaptation was crucial for tracking prey across frozen ground. The cold climate also meant that carcasses could remain edible for longer periods, allowing predators and scavengers to return to kills over several days. Smaller carnivores, such as wolverines and Arctic foxes, also thrived. They scavenged leftovers from larger predators and hunted rodents or birds. Together, these hunters maintained the balance of life on the steppe. Their presence ensured that only the strongest or most adaptable animals survived. The competition between predator and prey shaped the evolution of both, leaving lasting marks on the creatures of the Ice Age. Families gather around fire. Ice Age humans relied on fire for survival. They learned to start and maintain fires using flint, pyrite, and dried plant material. Fire provided warmth during freezing nights and protection from predators. It allowed people to cook meat, making it safer and easier to digest. Families gathered around the flames, sharing food and story. Firelight marked the center of each camp. People arranged stones or bones in a circle to contain the flames and prevent accidents. Camps often stood near rivers or sheltered by hills, chosen for access to water, wood, and game. Groups moved with the seasons, following animal herds and the growth of plants. When they settled, they built windbreaks and shelters from mammoth bones, wood, and hide. Around the fire, adults repaired clothing and tools. Animal skins were scraped clean and softened using stone scrapers and bone awls. Children learned by watching and helping with simple tasks. Elders shared knowledge about hunting routes, weather patterns, and dangerous animals. These lessons increased the group's chances of survival. Fire also played a role in making tools. Heat hardened wooden spear shafts and shaped bone and antler points. People used fire to crack open large bones for marrow, an important source of fat. The warmth allowed them to work longer during cold nights, preparing for the next day's hunt. At night, fire kept dangerous animals at a distance. Predators such as wolves and cave lions hesitated to approach the light and smoke. This gave families time to rest and recover. The fire's glow provided a sense of safety and a gathering place for the group. Marks and carvings on bones and stones were often made by firelight. These symbols may have recorded hunts, marked territory, or served as teaching tools. The reason for each mark is not always clear, but their presence shows the importance of shared spaces and activities. Fire was more than a tool. It was a boundary between survival and danger. Every family depended on it, night after night, as they faced the challenges of the Ice Age world. Tools carved from bone and stone. Ice Age people shaped their world with tools made from bone, antler, and stone. They selected hard stones like flint and chert for making blades and spear points. Using another stone as a hammer, they struck flakes from a core, creating sharp edges. These flakes became knives, scrapers, and arrowheads. The process required skill and practice. Each tool was shaped for a specific task, such as cutting meat, scraping hides, or working wood. Bone and antler were also important materials. After a hunt, people cleaned and split large bones. They used stone tools to carve points, needles, and awl. Antler tines were shaped into wedges for splitting wood, or as handles for stone blades. Some bone tools were decorated with lines or notches. These marks may have served as counting aids, ownership signs, or simple decoration. Spear points made from flint or bone were attached to wooden shafts using animal sinew and natural glues. These weapons allowed hunters to bring down large animals from a distance. Harpoons made from antler were used for fishing and hunting aquatic animals. Some groups developed barbed points for greater effectiveness. People also made tools for daily tasks. Scrapers cleaned animal hides, which were then used for clothing and shelter. Awls and needles pierced holes in leather, making it possible to sew garments. Grinding stones crushed seeds and roots for food. Hammerstones broke open bones to reach the nutrient-rich marrow inside. Toolkits varied by region and available materials. In some areas, people made composite tools, combining stone, bone, wood, and sinew. Others specialized in certain types of points or blades, reflecting local traditions and need. Over time, new designs spread between groups through trade or migration. The creation and use of these tools required careful planning and steady hands. Each tool extended human ability to hunt, gather, and survive. The marks left on bone and stone are still found today. Silent evidence of daily life during the Ice Age. Marks and carvings in the darkness. During the Ice Age, people left marks and carvings on bones, stones, and cave wall. These marks appeared in shelters, campsites, and deep inside caves. Some were simple lines or notches, while others formed detailed images of animals. Horses, bison, mammoths, and reindeer were common subjects. The artists used stone tools to carve or engrave, and sometimes applied mineral pigments like ochre and charcoal for color. Cave paintings have been found in places like Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain. These paintings often appear far from the cave entrance, in areas that required torches or small lamps for light. The process of creating them took planning and effort. Artists prepared surfaces by scraping away loose rock or soot. They sometimes outlined figures before filling them in with color. Some images are lifelike, showing careful observation of animal shapes, movement, and behavior. In addition to animals, some carvings and paintings show abstract pattern. Dots, handprints, and zigzag lines appear alongside animal figures. The meaning of these marks is not certain. Some researchers think they may have been used in rituals or to record important events. Others suggest they help teach young hunters about the animals they would encounter. Portable art also appeared during this period. People carved small figurines from ivory, bone, or stone. The Venus figurines found across Europe show stylized human forms. Some carvings depict animals or scenes from daily life. These objects could be carried from place to place, suggesting personal or symbolic importance. Marks on tools and weapons may have served as ownership signs or tallies. Notched bones could have been used for counting or keeping track of time. Some marks are so precise that they suggest a system of communication, though no true writing existed. These carvings and paintings are among the oldest known examples of human creativity. They show that Ice Age people not only survived, but also found ways to record and share their experiences, even in the darkness of their world. A land unlike any today. The Ice Age world was not simply colder than today. Its landscapes, animals, and climate are fundamentally different. The mammoth steppe, the largest ecosystem of its time, stretched from Western Europe across Siberia and into North America. This grassland was not a tundra, nor a dense forest. It was a windswept plain, dominated by hardy grasses and small flowering plants. Trees were scarce, limited to river valleys and sheltered slopes. The size of the mammoth steppe was immense. It covered more ground than any grassland seen in the modern world. The steppe supported great herds of woolly mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer. These animals moved in large groups, migrating with the seasons to find fresh grazing. Their constant movement trampled paths into the earth and spread seeds across the plain. Predators followed the herds. Calf lions, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats hunted in groups or alone. Their bodies were adapted for strength and endurance. Broad paws kept them from sinking into snow, and thick coats protected them from the cold. The balance between predator and prey shaped the lives of all creatures on the steppe. Other animals, now extinct, also lived in this environment. Giant ground sloths, woolly rhinoceroses, and steppe antelope grazed alongside the more familiar species. Birds, such as the great auk and the giant vulture, scavenged the remains left by hunters and predators. Small mammals and insects thrived in the grass and soil, forming the base of the food chain. Humans used the land's resources to survive. They hunted the large animals for meat, hides, and bones. They gathered edible plants and fished in cold rivers. Camps were often set up near water sources or animal trails. The open landscape allowed for long-distance travel, but it also exposed people to harsh winds and sudden storms. The Ice Age world was vast, open, and unforgiving. Its scale and diversity have no true equivalent in the present day. Every living thing was shaped by the demands of this unique land. Great herds roamed the steppe. On the mammoth steppe, animal life gathered in numbers unseen today. Woolly mammoths led the great herds. These animals moved in lines across the plains, guided by matriarchs who remembered the best routes to food and water. Each herd included mothers, calves, and juveniles, with adult males often traveling alone or in small bachelor groups. Mammoths dug through snow with their tusks, searching for grass and sedges buried beneath the surface. Their constant movement opened paths for other animals and shaped the landscape. Bison were the most numerous grazers. Steppe bison were larger than modern bison, with long horns and thick coats. They formed massive herds that could stretch for miles. These herds grazed on tough grasses, moving in response to changing seasons and food supplies. Bison herds attracted predators and provided meat, hides, and bones for human hunters. Wild horses also roamed the steppe in large groups. Their stocky bodies and dense fur protected them from the cold. Horses grazed alongside mammoths and bison, using their hooves to break through crusted snow. Reindeer and saga antelope completed the picture, migrating long distances between summer and winter ranges. These animals relied on speed and alertness to avoid predators. Predators followed the herds. Calf lions, dire wolves, and saber-toothed cats watched for opportunities to strike. They targeted the young, weak, or isolated members of the herds. The presence of so many large animals meant that scavengers such as Arctic foxes and wolverines could also survive on the remains of kills. The movement of the herds was not random. Animals followed ancient migration routes shaped by rivers, hills, and seasonal changes in vegetation. These routes remained the same for generations. The size and regularity of the herds helped maintain the grassland. Grazing prevented shrubs and trees from taking over, keeping the steppe open and productive. Human groups tracked the herds, setting up camps along migration paths. They learned to predict herd movements and used this knowledge to plan hunts. The fate of people, predators, and grazers was tightly linked in this vast, interconnected ecosystem. Survival strategies of giants. Giant animals of the Ice Age developed unique strategies to survive the harsh conditions. Woolly mammoths relied on their thick fur, dense underwool, and layers of fat to insulate against freezing temperatures. Their long, curved tusks were used to sweep aside snow and uncover buried grasses. Mammoth herds moved constantly, rarely staying in one place for long. This movement prevented overgrazing and allowed the grasslands to recover. Steppe bison and wild horses also formed large herds. Herd behavior offered protection from predators, as many eyes could spot danger quickly. When threatened, bison would form defensive circles, placing calves in the center and facing outward with sharp horns ready. Horses depended on speed and stamina to escape attacks. They could run for long distances across open plains, outpacing most predators. Giant ground sloths, such as Megatherium in South America and the smaller Eremothium in the north, used their size as a defense. These animals stood over 6 meters in length and weighed several tons. Their long claws could deter predators, and their thick hides provided additional protection. Ground sloths were mostly solitary, foraging for leaves, twigs, and roots in wooded areas and open steppe. Woolly rhinoceroses had thick, shaggy coats and a large hump of fat on their shoulders for energy storage. Their 2 horns, one long and curved, the other shorter, were used to clear snow and defend against threats. Like mammoths, woolly rhinos migrated seasonally in search of food. Predators adapted as well. Dire wolves hunted in coordinated packs, using teamwork to bring down larger prey. Saber-toothed cats relied on ambush tactics, using cover to get close before striking with powerful forelimbs and long canine teeth. Cavy lions, leaner than modern lions, used endurance to chase prey over long distances. Each species developed traits to cope with cold, scarcity, and danger. Their bodies, behaviors, and group strategies allowed them to thrive in the demanding environment of the Ice Age steppe. Earth's orbit and tilt transformed climate. The Ice Age was shaped by slow changes in Earth's position and movement through space. Earth's orbit around the Sun is not a perfect circle. It stretches and relaxes over cycles lasting about 100,000 years. When the orbit is more elongated, the difference between Earth's closest and farthest points from the Sun increases. This affects how much solar energy reaches the planet at different times of year. Earth's axis is also tilted. Today, the tilt is about 23.5 degrees, but it changes over a cycle of about 41,000 years. Sometimes the tilt is greater, and sometimes it is less. When the tilt is smaller, summers in the northern hemisphere are cooler. Less ice melts, so glaciers can grow. When the tilt is greater, summers are warmer and more ice disappears. The axis does not point in the same direction forever. It wobbles like a spinning top, completing one full cycle every 26,000 years. This wobble, called precession, changes the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's position in its orbit. Together, these cycles are known as Milankovitch cycles, named after the Serbian scientist who studied them in the early 20th century. These astronomical changes happen too slowly for any single person or animal to notice. But over thousands of years, they have a powerful effect on climate. When orbital conditions favor cool summers, ice sheets advance. Snow and ice build up year after year, reflecting sunlight and keeping temperatures low. When orbital conditions shift, summers become warmer and the ice retreats. These cycles have repeated many times during the last 2.5 million years. Each glacial period lasted tens of thousands of years, followed by shorter, warmer interglacial periods. The modern landscape, with its valleys, lakes, and coastlines, was shaped by the advance and retreat of ice, driven by these slow changes in Earth's orbit and tilt. Slow movements shaped the Ice Age. The slow advance and retreat of glaciers changed the face of continents. As ice sheets grew, they pressed down on the land beneath them. The weight of the ice caused the Earth's crust to sink by hundreds of meters in some region. Glaciers moved outward from their centers, flowing like slow rivers of ice. They scraped and scoured the bedrock, carving deep valleys and shaping mountain ranges. Rocks and soil pushed ahead of the ice formed long ridges called moraine. When the glaciers melted, these moraines remained as evidence of the ice's path. The movement of glaciers also created thousands of lakes. In North America, the Great Lakes formed in basins left behind by retreating ice. Smaller lakes and ponds dotted the landscape where blocks of ice melted and left depressions in the ground. Rivers changed course as ice blocked old channels and forced water to find new paths. Some valleys filled with meltwater to become new lakes, while others drained and became dry plains. Sea levels dropped as more water became locked in the ice sheets. New land appeared along the coasts, and land bridges connected continents. The Bering Land Bridge linked Asia and North America, allowing animals and humans to migrate between them. Britain was joined to mainland Europe, and Australia was connected to Southeast Asia. These land bridges were exposed only during the coldest periods, when glaciers were at their greatest extent. When the ice began to melt, the land slowly rose again in a process called isostatic rebound. This uplift continues today in areas once covered by thick ice. As glaciers retreated, sea levels rose and flooded the newly exposed coastal plains. Some land bridges disappeared beneath the waves, cutting off connections between continents. The scars left by glaciers can still be seen in the shape of valleys, the course of rivers, and the position of lakes. Every movement of the ice left a mark on the land, shaping the world that followed. Climate patterns set the stage. As the Ice Age continued, climate patterns shifted in response to the changing positions of ice sheets, ocean currents, and atmospheric circulation. The presence of massive glaciers altered wind patterns across continents. Cold air masses moved south from the ice, creating strong, persistent winds over the mammoth steppe. These winds carried dust and fine sediments, which settled to form thick layers of loess soil in parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. Loess soils remain some of the most fertile in the modern world. Ocean currents also changed as ice sheets expanded and contracted. The melting of glaciers released large amounts of fresh water into the oceans. This influx of cold, fresh water disrupted existing currents, such as the North Atlantic Drift. Shifts in ocean currents affected global temperatures and rainfall patterns. Some regions became much drier, while others experienced increased precipitation. Storm systems responded to the new land and sea configurations. As glaciers redirected rivers and reshaped coastlines, storm tracks shifted. Some areas that had once received regular rainfall became arid plains. Other regions, especially near the edge of the ice sheets, saw frequent snowstorms and long winters. These changes influenced the distribution of plants and animals across continents. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere fell during glacial periods. Lower carbon dioxide contributed to colder global temperatures. Ice cores from Antarctica and Greenland record these changes, showing a close link between greenhouse gases and climate shifts. As the ice sheets advanced, more carbon was stored in soils and oceans, further cooling the planet. The combination of altered winds, ocean currents, and atmospheric composition created a patchwork of environments. Grasslands, tundra, and forests formed in different regions, each supporting unique communities of plants and animals. Humans adapted to these varied climates by developing new tools, clothing, and strategies for survival. These climate patterns set the stage for the final phases of the Ice Age. As the world warmed and glaciers retreated, the landscape and climate would change again, leading to the rise of new ecosystems and the spread of modern humans. Sea levels fall and rise. During the Ice Age, sea levels dropped as more water became trapped in the growing ice sheets. At the coldest point, sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than today. This exposed vast coastal plains and created land bridges between continents. The Bering Land Bridge connected Asia and North America, allowing animals and humans to cross on foot. Other land bridges joined Britain to Europe and Australia to Southeast Asia. The newly exposed land was not empty. Herds of mammoths, bison, and horses grazed on the fresh grass. Human groups followed the animals, hunting and gathering along the coasts and rivers. Rivers flowed across what is now the ocean floor, forming broad valleys and deltas. Bays became meadows, and new hunting grounds appeared where the sea had once been. As the world warmed and glaciers began to melt, the process reversed. Water from the melting ice sheets poured into the oceans, causing sea levels to rise. Coastal plains disappeared beneath the waves. Land bridges were flooded, cutting off migration routes and isolating populations. The Bering Land Bridge vanished under the rising sea, separating Asia from North America for the last time. The rising seas transformed the map of the world. Islands formed where there had once been hills on dry land. Rivers changed course as their mouths were drowned by the advancing ocean. Some valleys filled with salt water, becoming new bays and estuaries. Animals and people living near the coasts had to adapt to the changing environment. Some groups moved inland, while others learned to exploit new resources along the shifting shorelines. The retreat of the ice and the rise of the sea were not sudden events. These changes unfolded over thousands of years. Each generation experienced only small shifts, but over time, the world's coastlines and continents were completely reshaped. The legacy of these transformations can still be seen in today's landscapes, from submerged land bridges to the fertile soils of former coastal plains. Continents linked by hidden paths. During the Ice Age, continents were connected by land bridges that no longer exist today. The most famous of these was the Bering Land Bridge, or Beringia, which joined Siberia and Alaska. This land bridge appeared when sea levels dropped and remained exposed for thousands of years. It stretched up to 1,000 miles wide at its greatest extent, covered by grasslands and low shrubs. Herds of mammoths, bison, and horses traveled back and forth across Beringia, followed by predators and human groups. Other land bridges formed elsewhere. Britain was connected to mainland Europe by a region known as Doggerland. This area was a broad plain, crossed by rivers and dotted with lakes. People and animals could move freely between what are now separate islands and continents. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf linked the Asian mainland with the islands of Sumatra, Java, and Borneo. Australia was connected to New Guinea and Tasmania by the Sahul Shelf. These connections allowed the spread of plants, animals, and humans across regions that are now divided by ocean. Migration across these hidden paths changed the course of history. Animals expanded their ranges, adapting to new environments and mixing with distant populations. Humans followed the herds, bringing tools, languages, and traditions with them. Archaeological evidence shows that people reached Australia at least 65,000 years ago, likely traveling across the exposed Sahul landmass. In Europe, the movement between Britain and the continent continued until rising seas flooded Doggerland about 8,000 years ago. As the Ice Age ended and sea levels rose, these pathways disappeared beneath the waves. Populations became isolated, leading to the development of distinct cultures and species. The remains of these land bridges are still studied by scientists. Submerged forests, animal bones, and ancient tools have been found on the seafloor, providing clues to the journeys made across these lost landscapes. The hidden paths of the Ice Age left a permanent mark on the world's geography and its history. Migrations across new horizons as land bridges connected continents, animals and humans moved into new territories. Herds of mammoths, bison, and horses crossed Beringia from Siberia into North America. Predators such as dire wolves and saber-toothed cats followed these herds, establishing new populations across the steppe. Fossil evidence shows that mammoths and bison spread rapidly, adapting to grasslands and the changing climate. Human groups also migrated along these routes. Archaeological sites in Alaska and northern Canada contain stone tools similar to those found in Siberia. These tools include spear points, scrapers, and blades, made for hunting and processing large animals. Radiocarbon dating places the earliest human presence in North America at least 15,000 years ago. Some evidence suggests even earlier arrivals. As people moved south, they encountered new environments. The ice sheets covering central North America formed a barrier, but as the glaciers retreated, corridors opened. One major route was the ice-free corridor between the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets. This passage allowed humans and animals to move from Alaska into the heart of the continent. Another route followed the Pacific coastline, where people adapted to marine resources and traveled by boat or along the shore. Migrations were not limited to North America. In Europe, people moved across Doggerland from the continent into Britain. Archaeological finds include flint tools, animal bones, and traces of campsites. These remains show that people hunted reindeer, horses, and aurochs, and gathered plants along rivers and lakes. In Southeast Asia and Australia, human groups crossed the Sunda and Sahul shelves, reaching new islands and adapting to tropical forests and coasts. These migrations shaped the genetic and cultural diversity of modern populations. As groups settled new lands, they developed unique languages, traditions, and technologies. The movement of people and animals across exposed plains and corridors changed the distribution of species and set the stage for later human society. The traces of these journeys remain in bones, tools, and the landscapes they crossed. Predators and people compete. During the Ice Age, people shared the land with powerful predators. Dire wolves hunted in packs, using teamwork to take down large prey such as bison and young mammoths. Saber-toothed cats, with their long, curved fangs, ambushed animals in the grasslands and near water sources. Cave lions, larger and leaner than modern lions, stalked herds across the mammoth steppe. These predators relied on strength, speed, and coordination to survive. Humans entered this landscape as newcomers. They did not have sharp claws or powerful jaws, but they used tools, fire, and strategy. Spears tipped with stone or bone could pierce thick hides. Groups worked together to track and corner animals. Fire was used to drive herds or to keep predators at a distance during the night. Camps were built in locations that offered natural protection, such as cliffs, riverbanks, or caves. Encounters between humans and predators were frequent. Sometimes, people scavenged the remains of kills left by saber-toothed cats or wolves. They waited until the predators finished feeding and then moved in to collect meat, bones, and hides. At other times, they competed directly for the same prey. Evidence from fossil sites shows cut marks from human tools on bones already gnawed by carnivores. This suggests a constant struggle for resources. Predators also posed a direct threat to people. Tracks and remains found near ancient camps indicate that wolves, lions, and bears sometimes approached human settlements. Fire circles and sharpened stakes were used to deter attacks. In some cases, people may have lost group members to ambushes by large cats or packs of wolves. Over time, humans developed new tactics. They learned to use fire as a weapon, waving burning branches or building barriers of flame. Spears and coordinated hunting allowed them to challenge even the largest predators. The relationship between people and carnivores was one of competition, caution, and adaptation. Each side learned from the other, shaping their behavior and survival strategies in the harsh world of the Ice Age. Fire and spears changed the balance. Fire and spears became turning points for Ice Age humans. Mastery of fire allowed people to control their campsites and defend against predators. They learned to keep fires burning through the night, using dry wood, animal fat, and even dried dung as fuel. Firelight and smoke discouraged wolves, cave lions, and bears from approaching too closely. People built fire circles with stones or bones to contain the flames and protect them from wind. Spears were another key development. Early humans shaped spear points from flint, bone, and antler. They attached these points to wooden shafts using sinew and plant fibers. Some groups developed throwing spears, while others used thrusting spears for close encounters. The ability to hunt from a distance reduced the risk of injury from large prey or aggressive predators. With fire and spears, humans could claim and defend territory. Camps were often placed near water sources, migration routes, or natural shelters. Groups coordinated hunts using fire to drive animals into traps or toward waiting hunters. Spears allowed people to take down animals larger than themselves, including mammoths, bison, and wild horses. This increased food supplies and provided hides for clothing and shelter, as well as bones for tools. Predators learned to avoid human camps. Evidence from archaeological sites shows fewer carnivore remains near long-term settlements, suggesting that fire and weapons were effective deterrents. Occasionally, humans and predators still clashed over kills or territory, but the balance had shifted. People now had the means to defend themselves and compete more directly for resources. The use of fire and spears also changed the way people processed food. They cooked meat to make it safer and easier to digest. They hardened spear tips in flames and used fire to shape other tools. These advances improved survival rates and allowed human populations to grow. Over generations, the combination of fire and spears marked humans as a new kind of competitor. They were no longer just another prey species. Their ability to adapt and innovate set them apart in the changing world of the Ice Age. An uneasy truce with giants. Humans and the great animals of the Ice Age shared the same land, water, and resources. They crossed the same migration routes and relied on the same grasslands and rivers. The relationship between people and giants was not one of complete dominance or defeat. Instead, it was a constant negotiation for survival. Herds of mammoths, bison, and wild horses moved across the mammoth steppe. People followed these herds, hunting when possible, but also relying on scavenging and gathering. Mammoths were not easy prey. They traveled in groups, protected their young, and could defend themselves with tusks and size. Most hunts targeted the weak, young, or isolated animals. Sometimes people waited for natural deaths, or for predators to finish feeding before approaching a carcass. Predators such as saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and cave lions also depended on the herds. They watched for opportunities, using stealth and strength to bring down prey. Humans and these predators sometimes arrived at the same kill site. Evidence from butchered bones shows both human tool marks and carnivore tooth marks on the same animal remains. This suggests that people and predators often competed for the same resources. Fire gave humans an advantage at night, but it did not guarantee safety. Large carnivores still approached camps, drawn by the smell of food or the chance to scavenge. People built barriers from bones, stones, or branches to protect their campsites. They kept watch in shifts, ready to defend themselves if needed. Despite these precautions, losses occurred. Archaeological sites show injuries on human bones, consistent with animal attacks. Some camps were abandoned suddenly, possibly after encounters with predators or stampedes. The truce between people and giants was uneasy and temporary. Over time, humans learned the habits of the animals they depended on. They tracked migration patterns, studied herd behavior, and passed this knowledge to each new generation. The balance between humans and giants shaped daily life, technology, and even the stories carved into bone and stone. Glaciers withdraw slowly. The end of the Ice Age did not come quickly. Around 20,000 years ago, the climate began to warm. Temperatures rose by small amounts over centuries. Glaciers started to melt, but the process was uneven. Some areas thawed while others remained locked in ice for thousands of years longer. The Laurentide ice sheet in North America and the Scandinavian ice sheet in Europe retreated in stages, leaving behind ridges, boulders, and vast plains of gravel and sand. As the glaciers withdrew, water poured from the melting ice. Rivers swelled, and new lakes formed in depressions carved by the ice. Some of these lakes were enormous, such as Lake Agassiz in North America. Meltwater sometimes built up behind ice dams. When these dams failed, sudden floods swept across the landscape, carrying boulders and reshaping valleys. In hours, sea levels began to rise as water returned to the oceans. Coastal plains and land bridges disappeared beneath the wave. The Bering Land Bridge, which had connected Asia and North America, was gradually flooded isolating populations on either side. Britain became separated from mainland Europe as Doggerland was drowned by the North Sea. Plants and animals responded to the changing environment. Forests spread northward into areas once covered by ice. Grasslands shrank as trees took hold. Many Ice Age animals lost their habitats. Some, like the woolly mammoth and woolly rhinoceros, became extinct on the mainland. Others, such as reindeer and bison, survived by adapting to new conditions. Human groups followed the retreating ice. They explored the new forests and rivers, hunting different animals and gathering new plants. Stone tools changed shape to suit new tasks. Campsites shifted as resources moved. The marks of the glaciers remained in the land. U-shaped valleys, scattered boulders, and lakes filled with clear water. The slow withdrawal of the glaciers set the stage for the next chapter in human history. The world was no longer gripped by ice, but the legacy of the Ice Age remained written into the earth itself. Floods reshaped the land. As the glaciers melted, enormous amounts of water were released across the continent. The retreating ice sheets left behind hidden lakes, sometimes held in place by walls of ice or debris. When these natural dams failed, water surged across the land with tremendous force. Entire valleys flooded in a matter of hours. Rivers that had once been small and steady became raging torrents, miles wide and filled with ice, mud, and boulders. In North America, the collapse of glacial Lake Agassiz sent waves of water south and east. These floods carved deep channels into the bedrock and created new river systems. The landscape of the northern plains changed permanently. In the Pacific Northwest, the Missoula floods occurred when ice dams holding back glacial Lake Missoula broke repeatedly. Each flood released hundreds of cubic miles of water, scouring the land and leaving behind giant ripple marks, dry falls, and vast gravel bars. These floodwaters carried rocks, trees, and soil for hundreds of miles. Boulders the size of houses were moved and deposited far from their original locations. Fine silt settled in low-lying areas, creating fertile soils that would support forests and grasslands for thousands of years. The floods also shaped new lakes, such as Lake Pend-Oreille and Lake Chelan, by filling valleys with water. In Eurasia, similar events took place. The retreat of the Scandinavian ice sheet released water into the North Sea and the Baltic. The Black Sea basin filled rapidly as meltwater surged through the Bosporus. These sudden influxes altered coastlines and created new habitats for plants and animals. The floods did not happen all at once. They came in waves over centuries, each one changing the land a little more. Floods reshaped river courses, created new wetlands, and left scars in the form of dry channels and gravel plain. The legacy of these floods can still be seen today in the shape of valleys, the course of rivers, and the distribution of lakes across former glaciated regions. New rivers and drowned valleys. As the glaciers retreated, the landscape continued to change. Meltwater carved new river channels through the exposed plains and valleys. Some rivers followed ancient paths, but many were forced into new courses by debris left behind by the ice. Old river beds filled with sediment, while new streams cut through soft soils and glacial deposits. The direction and flow of water shifted, creating networks of braided rivers and wide floodplains. In North America, the Mississippi River system expanded as meltwater from the north poured southward. The Missouri and Ohio rivers grew in size, carrying silt and gravel from the melting ice sheets. In Canada, the Mackenzie River system formed, draining the vast northern plains into the Arctic Ocean. Many of these rivers still follow routes first established during the end of the Ice Age. Drowned valleys became a common feature in regions where sea levels rose. As water from melting glaciers returned to the oceans, coastlines advanced inland. Low-lying river valleys flooded, creating long, narrow inlets known as fjords in places like Norway, Scotland, and Alaska. These fjords formed when glacial valleys, carved deep below sea level, were invaded by the rising sea. In eastern North America, the Chesapeake Bay and the St. Lawrence estuary developed as river valleys were submerged. The rising sea also flooded former coastal plains. Areas that had once been grasslands or forests disappeared beneath shallow seas. In Europe, the North Sea covered the land bridge known as Doggerland, isolating Britain from the continent. In Southeast Asia, the Sunda Shelf vanished under the waters, separating islands that had once been connected. Wetlands formed where meltwater collected in low areas. Marshes, swamps, and bogs developed along new river courses and in shallow basins. These wetlands supported a wide range of plants and animals, providing important habitats as the climate warmed. The creation of new rivers and the drowning of valleys marked the final transformation of the Ice Age landscape, shaping the world that followed. Wrangel Island's last mammoths. As the Ice Age ended, most woolly mammoths disappeared from the mainland. Their grassland habitats shrank as forests spread and the climate warmed. Human hunting and environmental changes contributed to their decline. By about 10,000 years ago, mammoths were extinct across most of Eurasia and North America. However, a small population survived on Wrangel Island, a remote landmass in the Arctic Ocean, north of Siberia. Wrangel Island remained isolated as rising seas cut it off from the mainland. The island's climate stayed cold and dry, preserving the open grasslands that mammoths needed. Genetic studies show that around 500 to 1,000 mammoths lived on Wrangel Island at the time of isolation. These mammoths were smaller than their mainland relatives, a result of limited resources and island life. Over time, the population declined further, and genetic diversity decreased. The mammoths of Wrangel Island adapted to their new environment. They grazed on grasses, sedges, and other tundra plants. Winters were long, and snow covered the ground for much of the year. The mammoths used their tusks to sweep aside snow and reach the vegetation below. Fossilized dung and bones found on the island confirm their presence and diet. For thousands of years, the Wrangel Island mammoths survived, while their kind vanished elsewhere. No evidence shows that humans reached the island during this period. The isolation protected the population from hunting, but it also meant no new animals could arrive. The small gene pool led to inbreeding and genetic defects. Recent DNA research has identified mutations affecting the mammoth's sense of smell, reproduction, and physical traits. Around 4,000 years ago, the last mammoths on Wrangel Island died out. This extinction happened long after mammoths disappeared from the mainland. The reasons include genetic decline, environmental stress, and possibly extreme weather events. The bones of these final mammoths remain on Wrangel Island, a record of the species' last stand in a world transformed by the end of the Ice Age. Isolation and extinction. Isolation played a major role in the extinction of many Ice Age giants. As sea levels rose, islands and continents became separated. Populations of animals that once roamed freely across vast grasslands found themselves confined to shrinking habitats. On Wrangel Island, mammoths could not mix with mainland herds. This isolation led to inbreeding, which reduced genetic diversity and increased the risk of harmful mutations. Over generations, the population became more vulnerable to disease, birth defects, and environmental changes. Similar patterns occurred elsewhere. On the Channel Islands off California, pygmy mammoths evolved from their larger ancestors. Cut off from the mainland by rising seas, these small populations faced limited food and space. They survived for thousands of years, but eventually disappeared. On the Mediterranean islands, dwarf elephants and hippos met the same fate. Isolation reduced their numbers and made them more sensitive to any disturbance. On the continents, extinction happened in waves. In Australia, giant marsupials such as Diprotodon and the marsupial lion vanished before the last northern ice sheets melted. In Eurasia and North America, the loss of habitat, climate shifts, and increased human hunting pressure led to the disappearance of mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant deer. Fossil evidence shows that some regions lost their megafauna more quickly than others, depending on local climate and the presence of humans. Environmental stress increased as the climate warmed. Grasslands gave way to forests and wetlands. Food sources changed or became scarce. Animals adapted to cold, open environments struggled to survive in the new landscape. Extreme weather events, such as droughts or severe winters, could wipe out small, isolated populations in a single season. The extinction of these animals left a lasting impact on ecosystems. Large grazers and predators had shaped the land for millennia. Their disappearance changed plant communities, soil conditions, and the balance of surviving animal species. The bones and remains found on islands and continents are silent witnesses to the final chapters of the Ice Age. Waves of disappearance. The extinction of Ice Age giants did not happen all at once. It unfolded in waves across different regions and time. In Australia, the first major extinctions occurred between 50,000 and 40,000 years ago. Giant marsupials, flightless birds, and large reptiles vanished. Fossil evidence shows that these animals disappeared soon after the arrival of the first humans. Climate shifts also played a role, reducing the availability of water and food. In Eurasia, the process was slower. Mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and giant deer survived in the north until about 10,000 years ago. As forests replaced grasslands, the open habitats needed by these animals shrank. Human hunting pressure increased as populations grew and new weapons appeared. Archaeological sites reveal butchered bones and hunting camps near the remains of large animals. North America saw its own wave of extinctions between 13,000 and 11,000 years ago. Horses, camels, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats disappeared. The timing coincided with the arrival of the Clovis culture, known for its distinctive stone spear points. The end of the Ice Age brought rapid warming, melting glaciers, and changing vegetation. These environmental changes, combined with hunting, pushed many species beyond recovery. On isolated islands, extinctions happened later. Mammoths on Wrangel Island survived until about 4,000 years ago. On the Channel Islands, pygmy mammoths disappeared around the same time. Dwarf elephants and hippos persisted on Mediterranean islands until humans arrived with new predators and competitors. Some animals, such as bison, reindeer, and elk, adapted and survived by shifting their ranges or changing their diets. Others, unable to cope with new conditions, vanished completely. The loss of large herbivores and predators altered the structure of ecosystems. Grasslands became forests or wetland. Small animals and plants filled the gaps left behind. The waves of disappearance marked the end of the Ice Age world. They set the stage for the rise of modern ecosystems and the spread of human societies across the globe. Landscapes transformed by ice. The retreat of the ice sheets left permanent marks on the planet's surface. Glaciers carved deep valleys, shaped mountain ranges, and scraped away soil and rock. In North America, the Great Lakes filled basins left by retreating ice. Rocky outcrops and U-shaped valleys in Europe and Asia show the paths of ancient glaciers. Moraines, drumlins, and eskers, ridges and hills formed by glacial debris, remain scattered across former ice-covered regions. As the ice melted, meltwater formed thousands of lakes and ponds. Some, like Lake Agassiz in North America, were among the largest freshwater lakes to ever exist. These lakes drained suddenly when ice dams broke, sending floods across the plains and carving new river channels. The scablands of Washington state and the broad valleys of central Canada are direct results of these floods. Rising sea levels flooded coastal plains and submerged land bridges. New coastlines formed as the ocean advanced inland. Fjords in Norway, Scotland, and Alaska filled with seawater, creating steep, narrow inlets where glaciers once flowed. In Europe, the North Sea covered Doggerland, transforming it from a grassland plain into a shallow sea. Soils left behind by glaciers were often thin and rocky, but areas covered by lush, fine, wind-blown silt became some of the world's most fertile farmland. In China, the Loess Plateau supports agriculture today because of these Ice Age deposits. In the American Midwest and Ukraine, thick layers of loess created rich prairies and grasslands. Forests expanded into regions once covered by ice. Pine, birch, and spruce grew first, followed by broadleaf trees as the climate warmed. Rivers and wetlands developed in low-lying areas, supporting new communities of plants and animals. The land continued to rise slowly in places where the crust had been pressed down by the weight of the ice, a process known as isostatic rebound. Every valley, plain, and forest in the northern world carries evidence of the Ice Age. These transformed landscapes became the foundation for modern ecosystems and human settlement. Forests and plains reborn as the Ice Age ended. Temperatures continued to rise. Glaciers retreated northward and shrank in size. Areas once buried under ice became exposed to sunlight for the first time in tens of thousands of years. The bare ground warmed, and plants began to colonize the new land. First came mosses and lichens, followed by grasses and hardy shrubs. These pioneer species stabilized the soil and created conditions for larger plants to grow. Over centuries, forests expanded into the former glacial zone. In Europe, birch and pine forests spread rapidly across the landscape. Spruce and aspen followed, taking root in the moist soil left by melting ice. In North America, similar patterns occurred. Pine, spruce, and fir forests advanced northward and westward. Deciduous trees such as oak, elm, and maple gradually replaced conifers in milder regions. The expansion of forests provided new habitats for animals. Elk, deer, and wild boar thrived in the mixed woodlands. Wolves, bears, and lynx followed the herds, adapting to the changing environment. Grasslands also reappeared in regions with drier soils and less rainfall. The North American prairies, Eurasian steppes, and Central Asian grasslands developed on the fertile soils left by glaciers and wind-blown lusts. Bison, antelope, and wild horses grazed these open plains. Birds such as cranes and grouse nested in the tall grasses. Small mammals, including hares and ground squirrels, found shelter in the new ecosystem. Wetlands formed in low-lying areas where meltwater collected. Marshes, bogs, and swamps supported amphibians, waterfowl, and a wide variety of plant life. Rivers and lakes stabilized, providing fish and fresh water for both animals and people. Human groups adapted quickly to the reborn forests and plains. They hunted new species, gathered fruits and nuts, and fished in rivers and lakes. Campsites move with the changing landscape. The rebirth of forests and grasslands set the stage for the next era of human development, agriculture, and settlement. Legacies written in stone and soil. The end of the Ice Age left permanent marks on the land. Glaciers carved deep valleys, scattered boulders, and shaped the basins of thousands of lakes. In North America, the Great Lakes filled depressions left by retreating ice. In Europe and Asia, U-shaped valleys and rocky moraines traced the paths of ancient glaciers. These features remain visible in the landscape today. Soil patterns also record the history of the Ice Age. Wind-blown silt, called loess, settled over large areas of Eurasia and North America. These deposits formed some of the world's most fertile farmland. In China, the Loess Plateau still supports agriculture on soils laid down during glacial periods. In the American Midwest and Ukraine, thick loess layers created rich grasslands and prairies. Isostatic rebound continues in regions once covered by thick ice sheets. As the weight of the ice disappeared, the land began to rise. In Scandinavia, parts of Finland and Sweden lift by several millimeters each year. This process has been ongoing for thousands of years and is still measured today. Stone tools and carvings from the Ice Age survive across continents. Archaeologists uncover spear points, scrapers, and awls made from flint, bone, and antler. Some sites contain carvings and painted images of mammoths, bison, and horses. These artifacts document the skills and daily lives of ancient people. In caves such as Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain, paintings remain preserved for over 15,000 years. Ancient flood channels and riverbeds formed during the melting of glaciers still guide the flow of water. Many modern rivers follow courses set at the end of the Ice Age. Submerged forests and peat beds along current coastlines mark the locations of ancient land bridges and plains now lost to the sea. The legacies of the Ice Age are written in the stones, soils, and waterways of the modern world. Each feature tells the story of a planet shaped by cold, movement, and adaptation. Marks in the atmosphere and oceans. The Ice Age left clear marks in Earth's atmosphere and oceans. During glacial periods, carbon dioxide levels in the air dropped to around 180 parts per million, much lower than today's levels. As the ice sheets grew, they trapped carbon in soils and oceans, further reducing greenhouse gases. When the glaciers melted, carbon dioxide levels rose again, reaching about 280 parts per million before the industrial era. This shift in atmospheric carbon changed global temperatures and rainfall patterns. Ice cores from Antarctica and Greenland record these changes. Layers of ancient ice preserve tiny bubbles of air, from each year. Scientists analyze these bubbles to measure past carbon dioxide and methane levels. The results show a close link between greenhouse gas concentrations and the advance and retreat of ice sheets. These records help explain how the planet's climate responded to natural changes over tens of thousands of years. Ocean currents also carry the legacy of the Ice Age. As glaciers melted, enormous volumes of fresh water flowed into the sea. This influx changed the salinity and temperature of ocean water, disrupting established circulation patterns. In the North Atlantic, the melting ice weakened the Gulf Stream and other currents. These changes affected the transfer of heat between the equator and the poles, altering regional climates. The shape of the ocean basins was also influenced by glacial activity. The weight of the ice pressed down on the continents, causing the seafloor near the edges of former ice sheets to rise as the land rebounded. This process, known as isostatic adjustment, continues today. It changes the depth of coastal waters and the position of shorelines. Storm systems and wind patterns still reflect the influence of the Ice Age. The distribution of land and sea, shaped by glacial erosion and flooding, directs the paths of major weather systems. The marks of ancient cold periods remain present in the rhythms of the atmosphere and the movement of the world's ocean. Earth's crust still rebounding. The end of the Ice Age did not mean an immediate return to equilibrium for the planet's surface. When the massive ice sheets melted, they released the enormous weight that had pressed down on the continents for tens of thousands of years. This weight had caused the Earth's crust to sink, sometimes by hundreds of meters. As the ice disappeared, the crust began to rise in a process called isostatic rebound. Isostatic rebound happens slowly. The mantle beneath the crust flows very gradually, allowing the land to lift upward over thousands of years. In regions once covered by the thickest ice, such as Scandinavia and northern Canada, the land is still rising today. In parts of Sweden and Finland, the ground lifts by up to 1 centimeter each year. In Hudson Bay, Canada, the rebound rate is also measurable, with land rising several millimeters annually. This ongoing uplift changes coastlines and water levels. In the Baltic Sea, islands are expanding, and new land is emerging from the water. Harbors built centuries ago sometimes find themselves stranded above the current shoreline. In Canada's north, ancient beaches now lie far inland, marking former sea levels when the land was lower. Isostatic rebound also affects river systems and drainage patterns. As the land rises, rivers may shift course or carve new channels. Lakes can become shallower or drain completely. The process can even trigger small earthquakes as the crust adjusts to its new position. Scientists monitor rebound using GPS stations and satellite measurements. These tools allow precise tracking of land movement over time. The data help researchers understand how the crust and mantle respond to changing loads and how these changes influence modern landscape. The effects of isostatic rebound are not limited to the far north. Smaller but measurable uplift occurs in parts of Scotland, Alaska, and the northern United States. The legacy of Ice Age ice sheets remains active, shaping the land long after the last glacier melted. The Earth's surface continues to respond, rising millimeter by millimeter, in a process that will last for thousands of years to come. The frozen past shapes the present. The effects of the Ice Age are visible in many features of today's world. In North America, the Great Lakes fill basins carved by glaciers. Their shapes and depths reflect the movement and melting of ancient ice. Across Europe and Asia, U-shaped valleys, fjords, and rocky moraines trace the paths of former glaciers. In Scandinavia and Canada, thousands of lakes and ponds mark places where ice blocks melted in the ground. Many of the world's most fertile soils were created during the Ice Age. Windblown silt, called loess, settled in thick layers across parts of China, the American Midwest, and Ukraine. These deposits support major agricultural regions. Glacial till, a mix of clay, sand, and gravel, left by retreating ice, covers large areas in northern Europe and North America. Farmers still find rocks and boulders in their fields, reminders of the glacier's power. Modern rivers and coastlines often follow routes set by glacial activity. The Mississippi, Danube, and Rhine rivers flow through valleys shaped by meltwater. The Chesapeake Bay and the Baltic Sea, formed when rising seas flooded former river valleys and lowlands. In Alaska, Norway, and New Zealand, fjords remain as deep, narrow inlets where glaciers once reached the ocean. The distribution of plants and animals was also shaped by the Ice Age. Species that survived in ice-free refuges spread northward as the climate warmed. Forests, grasslands, and wetlands developed in new patterns, influenced by soils and landforms left by the glaciers. Some animals, like reindeer and musk oxen, still live in regions that resemble the ancient steppe. Human settlement patterns reflect the legacy of the ice as well. Towns and cities often grew along rivers and lakes created by glacial action. Transportation routes follow natural corridors formed by valleys and passes. Archaeologists continue to find tools, bones, and carvings buried in glacial deposits, offering new information about the people and animals of the Ice Age. The frozen past is present in every landscape shaped by ice, water, and time.